6th grade. When you teach 6th grade, you gotta be loud. So if someone in the back, Bill, you're right in the back, just give me a thumbs up if you can't still hear me. Well, thank you all very much. Once again, my name is Marika Hecht. I work with the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. I really appreciate everyone coming out tonight. I know there's a lot of love and passion for Frick Park, and I think no matter what you brought into this meeting, I know we have that common ground, and I hope that you'll learn a lot about where we are, and we're interested in learning from you. Meg gave a nice introduction to the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. We are 14 years old. We've done a number of wonderful projects. Some of these may be familiar to you. This is the first one that we did at the Reynolds entrance. The Shelby Park Cafe, of course, is now a beautiful visitor center. The Highland Park Entry Garden is now this wonderful place to go and sit with your family or bike around. This is perhaps the most stunningly different project, the Shelby Plaza, which now, I think last year boasted 1,000 visitors in a day. We're hoping for a 1,000,000th visitor this year, so this is a tremendous transformation. Some folks may not be as familiar with Riverview. This was a wonderfully loved project. The Riverview Chapel Shelter is now one of the most reserved spaces in all 4 of the parks since it was restored. And of course now one of our major projects is a trail and signage improvement project that's happening in all 4 regional parks. This shot is from Frick Park down along 9 Mile Run. You'll see 100 new signs in the parks. This is very exciting. For anyone who's from Pittsburgh, you know how to get around, but if you're not, it's real nice to hopefully have some directional signs. And of course, another project that we're completing is a restoration of the Mellon Walled Garden. This really represents a change for the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy. When we were founded, we focused only on the 4 regional parks, Frick, Highland, Shenley, and Riverview. With the Ravenstall administration, we've been encouraged to work in additional parks as time and resources allow, and this is an example of a park that we're working on. This restoration has just been completed and will be opening in a week. And of course, as Fred mentioned, we are working on a regional parks master plan update, which is a nice segue to the big project that is probably on many of your minds and is on my mind on a daily basis, which is my main focus, which is the Environmental Center at Frick Park. Folks who are from here know this Environmental Center burned down about 8 years ago now. A major tragedy, but also hopefully an incredible opportunity to really deepen and enrich even more children's lives with environmental education if we can get this rebuilt. And about 6 years ago, a very concerted planning process was begun with the City of Pittsburgh and the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy to work with community folks to try to learn more about what would their vision be. If we were to redo an environmental center, would it just be building a new building, or is there a way to rethink the whole space? And one of the things that came out of that, probably the primary thing that came out of that, was a vision for using the environmental center for education through restoration. And that's a very important concept. Once upon a time, a tremendous number of children came through the environmental center in short bursts. And what a lot of people in the community said was they wanted their children to have a deeper experience. They wanted them to get into the park more, have more contact with the environmental center staff. And then when they were there, they wanted them to actually be doing something that improved the park. So the folks who work at the environmental center really took that to heart. They recognized that environmental education has numerous benefits, whether it's improving test scores, decreasing ADD, improving mental health, physical health, but that if they were really going to have that kind of impact on children, they were going to need to reevaluate their programming. About 4 years ago, the Environmental Center staff embarked in a pretty serious partnership with Colfax Elementary School, and now has, for the last 4 years, been working with every single first grader at Colfax. They bring the children into the park, not 1 time, 6 times throughout the school year. So the kids are there twice in the fall, twice in the winter, in the dead of winter, which I think is amazing, and in the spring to see the park through the seasons. And each time they learn a little bit about a habitat, and then they actually do something to improve that habitat. Then 2 years ago, as many of you folks who live right in the area know, the Environmental Charter School opened. And the Environmental Charter School was also really interested in participating in this program. This is a wonderful program. They wanted all their first graders there. Well, at that time, the Parks Conservancy realized this is wonderful. More people want to use the park, engage in the environmental center, but at the same time, that means there's going to be more little feet running through the park, using the park as an educational facility. What is that going to do to the park? So about 2 years ago, we started to look at this idea of outdoor learning spaces. Is there a way to identify places in the park where we could bring groups of children to learn about the park in hands-on ways without doing negative impact to the park? The other thing that we thought was, is there a way to engage families better? We see that families are all the time using Forbes and Braddock Playground or Blue Slide Playground, but our family is always engaging in the interior world. Is there a way to encourage them? So walk, maybe they've started at the playground and maybe they're going to take a little walk and engage with nature and learn something in an informal setting. And that is really the goal of these environmental outdoor learning centers. And you can see they're very much spread out around the park, ideally in places both where there's real value in terms of environmental learning, but also not a lot of negative impact, hopefully. One thing that's very important to impress upon everyone is these are just ideas. They're concepts. These are dots on a map that were vet with DPW, that were shared with city parks for their feedback, where we had a landscape architect weigh in. But that's as far as we got. We didn't design any of the spaces. We anticipated some of them would be very, very informal. Maybe a couple of trees have fallen down and the Department of Public Works might artfully rearrange them so that a small group could sit down. One of them might be an opportunity for kids to do a ecological restoration project. Some of you may be eco-stewards in the room. We have wonderful volunteers who volunteer in the parks. Maybe kids can be eco-stewards and improve a habitat area. And maybe as a citizen, you're walking by, you might not even realize that it was an outdoor learning space, but in matter of fact, the children have learned through the process of being there. That was really as far as we got, and we thought, okay, when we are able to raise enough funds to really kick off a thorough design project for the Environmental Center, this will be part of it. And then an incredible tragedy happened, which I think you're all very familiar with, which is that Kate and Peter Embrisco were killed in a car accident last April. And that was very heart-wrenching for the family, for anyone who knew the children, for many people who've never met the kids, because it was such an emotional experience for people. It was also an incredible opportunity and a gift, because the family, rather than turning inwards, turned outwards and said, how can we take what's happened and give back to the community and do something for not just our family, but for all the children of Pittsburgh? What might that be? And this is an important moment to stop, because no matter where you came into this room in terms of your thinking, probably most of you came in thinking the word playground. Because in the beginning, that is very much what it was conceived to be, Kate and Peter's playground. In fact, a lot of you may even have seen those little bumper stickers, or you might even have a little bumper sticker on the back of your car that says KPP, Kate and Peter's Playground. That was a great idea. One of the children, Kate, actually went to the Environmental Charter School, and the notion was, hey, let's build a playground for the Environmental Charter School. Wonderful. Well, as the project started to develop and lots of people started to contribute money, over 600 people contributed money to this memorial fund, I think folks took a step back and said, wait a minute, is this really what we want to do, just build a playground for the Environmental Charter School? Can this be even bigger? And it was around that time that folks at the Memorial Fund approached the Pittsburgh Parks Conservancy and said, would you please manage this process for us? This is what you do. You do projects in the parks, you work with communities, you work with the city. Can you help us through this process? To which we said, thank you very much for this opportunity. We very much appreciate it. And we also recognize that there isn't really a need for a playground, a traditional playground at this location. Why? Because it's very, very close to the Forbes and Braddock Playground, a very popular traditional playground. It didn't seem like that was a good use of that space. But it seemed like this idea could dovetail very well with the notion of outdoor learning spaces that already existed. Is there some way to marry these two ideas? And so we began to talk more, and I spoke more with Amy. And as I spoke with her, we discovered that the image in her mind was really of a treehouse. And what could speak more than a treehouse to an outdoor learning space? You could be studying trees, you could be in the trees, you could be below the trees, you could be learning about trees. One way or another, it seemed like the theme of a treehouse could speak to the outdoor learning space concept. And that's really what brought us to this place. So I want to just take you through, because this is very, very important. I want to reiterate what Meg said earlier. We are in the infancy of this project. And I know people have a lot of feelings about whether it should go, not go, where it should go. But what I want to send the message to all of you is this has really just begun. One of the very first things that we always do is discuss a concept like this with our partners at the city. And two of our primary partners that we work with often in the early stages are the city parks, which is Parks and Recreation, and the Department of Public Works. And we vet the idea in an informal way. They had known about the outdoor learning spaces, but this was now more concrete. There was some funding brought to the table. Should we start to pursue this idea?